Hey, what's up, you guys? Paul here. So, a new Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duel ban list actually dropped a couple days ago, and for some reason I forgot to make a video about it. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about this ban list now, share a few of my thoughts, take it card by card, and at the end, as always, I want to hear what you guys think. It's probably the biggest Master Duel ban list we've had in a hot minute, at least, and definitely one with some kind of broad implications depending on how you look at it. So, yeah. First things first, we'll go through these cards that went to 3. There is Nadir's Servant, which is, yeah, it kind of makes sense. This is one of those consistency cards for the Dogmatica deck. I'm really happy about this. I play Dogmatica. I've been using it for a very long time in Master Duel, at least like the last month or so. And I've actually gotten it up to Master Rank 3 right now. So doing pretty well with the deck, but this isn't about me. It's about the list. So this doesn't affect many other decks. It doesn't really even increase the power of Dogmatica much. It's just a little bit more reliable. So good, cool pick. Ancient Fairy Dragon going to 3 also makes perfect sense. Ever since getting that errata, I mean, I just think like they've maybe been a little weary of it. But yeah, Ancient Fairy Dragon isn't causing anybody any problems. I don't think anybody's actually going to be running 3 to begin with. So yeah, it can safely do that. I see no issues here. And finally, Girsu the Orcus Mech Knight, which, like Nadir's Servant, is kind of one of those things that feels like it's just a bit of a holdover from that OCG kind of ban list stuff that Master Duel started with, and they just sort of kept around for a long time. So yeah, it's finally at 3. This means the Orcus are at, I don't know, you could call it full power. I mean, they're not going to give them like, Nightmare Mermaid or anything, I assume. But it's pretty decent, and other decks can also make use of this. I think Crawlers and Mech Knights, of course, could probably see some applications of this card. At least that's what I've read a bit online, so good for them. But it's really not the unlimited cards that are all that interesting on this list. It starts to get a little bit more interesting when you get to the semi-limited section. So there's Blaster, Dragon Ruler of Infernos. Kind of a weird one, but not one I disagree with. I mean, I've said for a while that like all the Dragon Rulers really could come off the list. I don't think it's going to make a big difference, but if nothing else, Blaster's probably the least troublesome or problematic out of all of them, so it going to 2 makes sense. I would say this could be like a way of Konami pushing fire decks, but I mean, the stuff from like Legendary Duelist and the new Fire King structure and all that isn't going to be getting like released in Master Duel for like 6 to 9 more months. So I think this is just them being a little bit progressive. It's like weird, like Master Duel ban lists get to be more experimental sometimes, it feels. But yeah, this card at 2, not a big problem. Cool. More Dragon Rulers off the list doesn't bother me one bit. Pot of Extravagance from 3 to 2. So this is the first of the picks that kind of feels a little bit like, it has some people raising their eyebrows. So the reason I think that they did this is just a way to kind of slightly curb the power of, control decks, trap decks, things like that. So Labyrinth comes to mind, and any other things that, somebody might run this card in, like people typically will run it in that kind of just the Inspector Board or Stun type of builds. And even Kashtira, at least currently, I've seen a fair amount of them running like Pot of Extravagance. So putting this to 2 certainly helps with that. I'll say this, I think that it's sort of amusing to watch the different Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess what would you call like versions of the game or whatever, iterations. The TCG, the OCG, and now Master Duel all kind of having their own different takes on like how to hit pot cards. Because like Pot of Extravagance is at 3 and stuff normally, but then it's at 2 here. Then the TCG's got like Pot of Desires at 2, which is kind of bizarre. We never even fully learned exactly why they hit it the way that they did. Like people suspect it was Sword Soul, but like Sword Soul's not really a meta deck, hasn't been one for a while in the TCG, but like they still keep Desires at 2. Is it a consistency thing? Do they not want people just drawing hand traps after their combos? But then in that case, why is that not also a thing in Master Duel? And then, like Prosperity's at 1 in Master Duel, but like it's kind of cool just to see like Konami wrestle with these different pot cards. I don't think I have a really particularly strong opinion on any of this in one way or another. Pot cards have never bothered me very much, but it's at 2 now, so I guess it's a slight hit to your average control deck. Some are only running 2 though. And then finally, let's see, there's Luster Pendulum and the Draco Slayer. So, no thoughts on this from me. It went from 1 to 2. So I think it can be used in the new Draco Slayer deck. It can allow them to search extra copies of the same card. So that could mean some more consistency and maybe even some more combo ability since it's at 2 now. I don't foresee it making a huge impact, but those of you guys who've been playing like those Pendulum and Draco Slayer Valence decks that I've been seeing so much in like Diamond and Master rank, you can let me know if this actually makes a bigger difference than I am assuming. But I tend to not really mind seeing these sorts of hits. Then we get to the limited stuff. So this is where it gets a little bit dicey and maybe in some cases controversial. So branded fusion goes from 2 to 1, and I've seen a strong mix on this. Some people feel that it was like undeserved because branded has not been as popular as it used to be, but I actually still think that branded is just an extremely strong deck and probably has a pretty decent win rate in Konami's eyes, and they just wanted to like bring it down a tad. I mean, this is a little bit frightening, I think, if you're a branded player, mostly because of the threat of Kashtira. Like, I think if Kashtira didn't exist, this wouldn't have been such a big deal to put to 1, but because it's a 1, it means that if this card gets banished face down by, like, Rise Heart, or by, what's the one that lets them, like, look at the top of your deck? Ogre? Or something. Like, whichever ones that, like, let them, like, banish stuff from the deck, if they banish your branded fusion face down, you're just done. Like, you can't recycle it, you can't really do anything with it. So that's going to be a really big threat. I think that's the only reason why I don't think I would have maybe put Branded Fusion to 1. Like, I still think Branded's going to be like a powerful deck. I still think it's going to be more than playable. But this is a pretty big hit to it. So they really seem to have been hitting just across this list. Tier, Branded, and Sprite, which were the 3 strongest decks up until maybe just the last couple of weeks. So yeah, they're just finishing off Branded here. Kind of sucks because like Aluber is also already at 2 and like Branded opening and all that. So I would have maybe liked to see more Bestial hits personally instead of Branded Fusion, but that's just me. Okay, next is That Grass Looks Greener. This is such a weird hit. I feel that That Grass Looks Greener is one of these cards that, in my opinion, should be either at like 3, so you can like play a deck around it and see it, or at 0. I know a lot of people say that about Maxi, and I kind of agree, but I think that with Grass, it being at 1 just means it's going to feel extra sacky when it goes off. But also, like, it's weird because, I mean, those be games where you don't see... I don't know. I don't know if I really like this card. I like being at 1. I didn't really even care for it being at 2. I think, like, 3 or 0 is kind of where I've started to land on cards like this. But personally, I think if they were going to hit it to 1, they should have just banned the thing. Just my opinion. I know that the 60-card decks are still going to magically open with it in ranked anyway, so... No big deal. Kelbeck the Ancient Vanguard goes from 2 to 1. This was always weird. I was surprised that they... didn't like have Kelbeck at 1 to begin with when they kind of did the thing, like that one list where they put them all at 1. I thought that they should have just kept them all at 1. Like Kelbeck was at 2 and it's kind of weird. It's one of the better ones. So yeah, it's at 1 now. This is definitely a big hit to the just tier like Ishizu strategy. They also banned Agito. Spoiler, but you guys already knew that. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a complaint about this. This is fine. Sprite, Jet, and Swap Frog. These are interesting. So Sprite Jet is a big consistency hit for Sprite. Like now, what is it? 2 starter, 2 blue, 1 Jet. So like opening hands are going to be really pretty unreliable with this deck. I'm not a huge like... I'm not so sure. I mean, I don't know that Sprite needed to get hit. I think that it was at like a decent power level as it was. I mean, it's still obviously very strong and annoying if you're like using a lower tier deck for sure. But it just feels like they're kind of become the new Fluanderies where they just kind of like slap it a little bit every single ban list until it just truly is 6 feet under. So Death by 1,000 Cuts. Swap Frog, same deal. It's a bit of consistency hit, although this one does do a little bit more. Because when I think about it, only having 1 Swap Frog actually makes Ronin Totem itself significantly harder to use. Like it just limits your amount of times that you can use Ronin Totem unless you're willing to run more frogs, and then if you run more frogs, and that means that they're worse to open with. So it's a whole thing. Yeah, this seems like this is a pretty mean list to Sprite. I still think Sprite would be playable, but it's going to be tough. And finally, the Forbidden cards. Number 86, Heroic Champion Ragominiad. Good, go away. Hate this card. It's interesting. This card was actually not... So this card had like gone down in play, I think, a lot since Master Duel's release. When the game first came out, I remember being like just horrified that this card was like at 3 and just legal and people were doing whatever they wanted with it. But and early on, like people played just all kinds of like Rongo, janky FTK things. It's definitely like fallen off a lot in recent months, but I do still think that cards like this just need to go. They can be very unwelcoming cards for new Master Duel players at lower ranks just getting terrorized by the card. So I'm all about it. Agito also gets banned. It's one of the Millers, the best Miller, really. So, cool. Yeah, I mean, that's 2 big hits to Ishizu cards right there. So that already hurts the tier deck a lot outside of the upcoming Merly ban as well. Phantasmal Lord, Ultimatil, Bishbalkin. I think this was just an FTK thing, I've been told. I hadn't seen it, but maybe it was about to get like more prevalent because I think it's about to be released. Either way, weird, cheesy FTK things like this, especially in a best of one game like Master Duel, are probably best left banned. There's also Block Dragon. I'm all about it. Don't like Block Dragon, never cared for the card. I think it extends combos way too much and makes Adamantipator's extremely obnoxious to face. So I don't have a problem with this. TCG banned it, and them following suit here is fine by me. I don't like Adamantipator's. Their turns never end. And then finally, Tier Element's Merly goes to 0. So I actually thought they were going to take the TCG approach of like, every Tier Element's fusion, like fuser going to 1. So there was going to be Merly, Havnus, and Sheeran all at 1. But straight up banning Merly is pretty harsh. Especially because this is they didn't ban Kit Kalos, which seems bizarre. I mean, I guess they want the illusion of it still being playable, although I think that Merly going to 0 plus these hits to the Ishizu cards effectively puts Tier out of the picture as like a top deck. I think it can still be played. I think it can still be like an engine for stuff. But Merly was probably the best one. It can mill the most net amount of cards. And also, it even allowed them to use like Sprite Elf and all that stuff. So, yeah, Merly, I think getting banned is probably if they wanted to hit one of the fusers, this was the biggest or best or most effective one to hit. So it's gone now, and that's your ban list. So a few thoughts on this one. Big ban list. This is kind of, I guess the most intriguing thing to me is seeing Master Duel really carve its own path as a version of Yu-Gi-Oh to play. I think that's a good thing if you like the idea that Master Duel is kind of a little different than the TCG and different than the OCG. It's a bad thing because it kind of pulls it maybe away from being a good playtesting tool, and you're having to like remember, okay, what's allowed in this one? I can run 2 pot of this in this game and 1 pot of that in that other game, and like it's interesting, like just taking different approaches to how they hit tier between different games and stuff like that. So it can make it a little bit confusing, but I don't mind it. Does it change a lot going forward? It just means that Kashtira is pretty obviously the deck to beat. I don't hate that because while Kashtira is obnoxious and annoying, it does mean that I only really have to prepare for the Kashtira deck. I think that at this point, the rate of play for Branded and Sprite and Tier is going to go down so low that I can kind of ignore it. And I also don't have to worry about, with a random like Rongo Mini and FTK, Adamantipator's popping up. So if you are concerned about like, the Kashtira Overlords, at least you can know that you can sort of tune your deck specifically for them. You could actually start maybe main decking something like, what is the card? Artifact Lancia or something in your main deck, or just other kind of hard like techs against them that might get you some value, but would have otherwise been useless against like Tier or Branded and stuff like that. So yeah, all in all, I'll give it like a 7.5 out of 10, maybe an 8. I mean, I think that they are slowly coming around to hitting cards that are problems. I was watching Joshua Smith's video, and he was saying that this could be like a sign that they'll ban Maxx C eventually. That might be a bit of copium to me. I feel like Maxx C at this point is just a card that is a part of the Master Duel experience, and they intended it to be that way, and that's just how they're going to go. I could be proven wrong, but that just seems like that's the case. So let me know what you guys think about this ban list. All in all, I don't dislike it. I'll still be playing Master Duel as always, for myself at least. So yeah, it's going to be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.